I'd like to welcome you to Friday's edition of our walk through Romans. Today we're going to be in Romans, the 6th chapter, and we're going to begin with verse number 5. Now, what we're going to try to do today is cover 3 verses, because these next 3 verses are basically a summation of what the Apostle Paul has already been teaching. So let me just say this. Go back through this week and catch up if you haven't been watching regularly. And then listen today as we bring this thought, not this chapter, but this thought to a conclusion. This is what he says in Romans, the 6th chapter, verse number 5. For if we have become united with him in the likeness of his death, certainly we shall also be in the likeness of his resurrection. What's the Apostle Paul talking about? We've been united. The word united means to grow together with something, to grow together with another person. Have you had a friend, and maybe this friend became a friend when you were in grade school and you just kind of grew up together with that friend? Well, that's what this Greek word united is talking about. It's talking about someone that you come alongside and you growing and changing your life together. So the Apostle Paul says we've become united with Christ, with him. And we become united with him in the likeness of his death. In other words, we become united with him. In the likeness means in the resemblance of his death. We've become united with him in the likeness of his death. We've talked about that this week. And then he goes on, he says, certainly we shall also be in the likeness of his resurrection. You know, Jesus rose from the dead. And because we are walking in the likeness of his death, and we also then walk in the likeness of his resurrection. What was Jesus like when he was resurrected? Jesus was living in a glorified body. We're not there yet. You understand that? But Jesus is now in complete, restored fellowship with the Father. You see, Jesus took sin on the cross. He was sinless up until the point of the cross. And then he took not his sin, but he took our sin on the cross. But now, in the resurrection, what do we see Jesus like? He is walking in complete, 100% restored fellowship with God. Do you understand that your fellowship with God is completely restored? As a man, you were born into sin. You were born into a place where you could never live a life that was holy enough to walk into the presence of God. But now, because of what Jesus did, we walk in the likeness of his resurrection. We walk in this place of restored fellowship with God. And not only that, someday we're going to grab a hold of our glorified bodies and we're going to walk and live a life without sin, but also a life in which there are no physical limitations. Now, today, in our earthly bodies, we still have limitations. But as far as our fellowship and our life with God, there are no limitations. We are walking in restored fellowship with him. Now, verse number 6. Knowing this, knowing what? Knowing this, that our old self was crucified with him in order that our body of sin might be done away with, so that we would no longer be slaves to sin. We've talked about that this whole week. So the Apostle Paul says, knowing this, and he uses this word ginosko. And the word ginosko means something that's in a complete sense. Knowing something completely. Knowing something and really realizing and really understanding. Knowing this, understanding this. And this is why it's so vitally important that we as believers understand this. Knowing this, that our old self was crucified with him, in order that our body of sin might be done away with, so that we are no longer be slaves to sin. We need to know it. We need to know it down inside of us. We need to know it with completeness. We need to know it with all certainty that the body of sin has been done away with. We are no longer slaves to sin. I was in the country of the Philippines, and I had preached on a Sunday morning, and the missionary had said, we're going to just send you down there, and we're not going to go with you to church. We've got our own church to take care of, and we're just going to send you down. And after the church service, we had a meal, and then they said, okay, Leon, just walk down this little path here. You'll come to a bus stop, and just sit there and wait for the bus. We'll give you some coin and you can pay for the bus. And so I'm sitting there waiting on the bus, and I'm looking around, and here comes a man with 3 chickens. And he lays these 3 chickens down, and he goes up to the thing where you get the ticket for the bus, and he just leaves those 3 chickens laying on the ground. And I'm thinking, man, if I were you chickens, I would be up and out of here, because you're about ready to become dinner. But they laid there. Why? Because they thought they were still bound. And you know what? A lot of believers are in that same place, where they think they are still bound to sin. And Jesus has set you free. You are no longer a slave to sin, so don't go back to sin. Verse number 7. Now I'm preaching real good, I think, anyway. For the one who has died is free from sin. We need to understand that we have died to sin. We have died, we've been buried, we've been resurrected. Those 3 steps that we've covered this week. Died, buried, resurrected. We who have died are free from sin. You do not, as a believer, have to sin. I didn't say you don't sin. You don't have to sin. You can walk in complete victory. You can walk above sin. You can walk in the will of God, the best things that God has for you. Thank you for watching this week. God bless you. Join us again next week as we continue to study the book of Romans, as we walk through Romans with you.